Hi, it's Friday and time to look back at what happened this week at Queen's Park. First of all, we're moving out of the pandemic. There's several steps coming up next week, and I want to talk about them. There are many aspects of the recovery from the pandemic which will take longer. Small business, surgical backlogs, and learning disruption. I want to talk about what can be done about those. The Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario released her 2020 report. And separately, there was a white paper from the Ontario government entitled Modernizing Privacy in Ontario. And lastly, the unions are taking the government to court on third-party election spending. As you may know, Bill 307 was pushed through the legislature last week. And I think that this court case is going to be a good idea for everybody. Keep watching to find out more, or join me next week as I look back at what happened at Queen's Park. First of all, there are several things happening as we exit the pandemic this coming week. Dr. Kieran Moore is taking over as Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health. And here in Kingston, we're very proud of that. He takes over tomorrow. On Monday, June the 28th, everybody who has had their first vaccination will be eligible for the second one. So if you haven't booked your second dose and you're eligible, you can go ahead and start booking on Monday, and you might be able to get it sooner. I can't wait for research on vaccinations for kids under 12. I've read that is scheduled to come in at the end of the summer, and then we'll be able to get the kids under 12 vaccinated, which will be very important, especially with back to school. Step 2 in Ontario's reopening plan has been accelerated by 2 days. It starts on Wednesday, and it's also been modified now to include haircuts. And I think a lot of people will be happy about that. Many people have mentioned that, and also mentioned that barbershops and hair salons are naturally very conscious of hygiene. But there are longer-term issues with the recovery. One of them is the surgical backlog. The province has recognized that by allocating $30 million from the part of the spring budget about recovery of the medical system. So that money has been allocated to helping to reduce the surgical backlog. There's a bigger issue, though, and that's the education disruption. As I talk to people with knowledge about education, about mental health, about special education, it's pretty clear that we have multiple warnings of high social and economic costs. The province's plan is expected out only later this summer, in July or August, but I hope the province tries to speed up what they can. Just like haircuts were moved forward from one step to a previous step. Whatever we can do early, we should start right away, because we only have a couple months before the start of the new school year. Thirdly, the Information and Privacy Commissioner released her 2020 annual report. It talks about a lot of things. One of the things that it addresses is the investigation into the cyber attack on Life Labs. But for the moment, that information is not going to be publicly available, because Life Labs is asking for a court order to prevent the public release of the report because of the fear of releasing confidential information. The Privacy Commissioner doesn't agree, so we'll have to see where that lands. Separately, the Ontario government released a white paper entitled Modernizing Privacy in Ontario. And the idea is that now we have a lot of digital data floating around. We have artificial intelligence making decisions and affecting people's lives. And so we want to have another look at whether we should be modernizing our laws about privacy in the digital age. I think that's a really good public debate to have, and this white paper is a precursor to possible legislation in a future year. You may remember that Bill 307 was pushed through the legislature last week using the notwithstanding clause of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And following that, the unions are going to take the government to court about the restrictions, the limitations on third-party election spending, because The actual restrictions were not addressed by the Superior Court of Ontario in their recent ruling. The court ruled on the increase in limitations and not the actual limitations. So I think it is a very good thing to go back and ask the question, what is the balance between free speech and the influence of money on our elections? I think in a perfect world, the government should have studied that question in a nonpartisan way, outside of the courts, put together a strong case for where that balance should be, and then implemented it through legislation instead of relying on the courts. But it's going to be in the courts, and asking that question is something that we need to do. If you like these videos, please follow me on social media and tell me what you think in the comments below. And please join me next week as I look back at what happened at Queen's Park.